This is Series T, where we find the greatest entrepreneurs and investors in the world and force them to have tea live on air. I'm Imad Akhan, founder and CEO of Mercury, and today we're having tea with Chris Lyons, who leads the Cultural Leadership Fund at Andreessen Horowitz. Chris previously served as Chief of Staff at Andreessen Horowitz and worked with Jermaine Dupri as a music producer and engineer. Chris, thanks for having tea with us.
Hey, cheers. My pleasure.
You've had kind of like an interesting trip eventually getting into being an investor. Give us a quick snapshot on like how you got here.
I was a founder of a company in the restaurant technology space called Picture Menu that flew me out to Silicon Valley. I was only supposed to be there for 3 months, ended up never going home from right outside of Atlanta, Georgia. Shortly after, I got connected with Ben Horowitz and Andreessen Horowitz, and they gave me a heads up for a chief of staff position. And, I was like 25 at the time, and it was a challenging process, but ultimately we were able to pull through. And that really kind of helped jumpstart and change, the future of my career to where now, ended up working under Ben as his chief of staff, but also learning a lot of different industries and sectors that has gotten me to the point today where I've taken all of my background information from the music industry to the startup world and now within venture capital to get us to the point now of launching the Cultural Leadership Fund, where we initially raised our initial fund in 2018, really just thinking about ways in which we can really kind of connect the dots between not just the world's greatest cultural leaders and bringing them in touch with the best new technology companies, but more so being a voice within a growing community within the startup ecosystem and figuring out how we can also kind of enable more African American and diverse backgrounds to also not one foot in the door, but 2 feet in and really be a part of the growing change that I was fortunate enough to get into.
I want to dive into like one aspect of that. You said, there's kind of cultural leaders and then there's technology leaders. Like, I guess, like, what do you think technology gets out of having kind of these cultural leaders involved more? And what do you think the kind of the cultural side gets out of it by being involved more in kind of tech in Silicon Valley?
Yeah. So actually, it's really interesting. So I see it as a couple different perspectives. So the thing that I always look for is like this idea in which I called shared genius. And so, obviously, like, you're a genius in your own aspect, especially if you were to come up with an idea that nobody else would have been able to come up with. And now, really helping getting it to market and leveraging technology. At the same time, we believe that outside of technology, there's also what we would consider geniuses, and how can we kind of, whether it's in the world of sports, whether it's in the world of music, entertainment, fashion, these are some of they're the world's greatest leaders for a reason, and they have insights and expertise that really have put them apart and allowed them to be revolutionary in their field. And thinking about like, hey, what if we could take some of that shared genius and apply it to the future of technology and vice versa? How can technology help impact some of the greatest leaders as they're really thinking through going and taking over their industry, or actually amplifying their ideas around innovation. And so taking that into perspective really allowed us to come up with something unique with the Cultural Leadership Fund, where for the first time in the history of Silicon Valley, we were able to bring a fund exclusively of the world's greatest athletes, entertainers, musicians, and senior level executives that also happen to all be African American. And so, and then make sure that they, as limited partners, had access not only to provide more African Americans onto the cap tables of some of the world's best technology companies at early stages, but also, really help implement and work together from an idea creation as people are really starting to think about, okay, if technology and culture are moving more and more closely together, then I think that having that shared genius to not only be involved on an investment side, but also behind the scenes as we're thinking through the future of the company as well.
Why do you think it's important to kind of tech, this, there's this like systemic problem where like African Americans are not involved enough in tech, whether it's like as like engineers or like founders or VCs. Or why did you think that, like coming at it from the cap table perspective, like why do you think that was like a good kind of place to innovate?
Well, I mean, the first piece was just that, I'm fortunate enough to be in the room when those decisions are being made, and also being on the cap table, within the Cultural Leadership Fund, and seeing the behind the scenes of where the equity is going. And, if you think that the future of wealth is going to happen within the technology industry, then, African Americans and people of color need to also have a seat at that table. So I think that there's one, being very intentional about making sure that we can increase the level of inclusion that's going into helping and fund the next generation businesses. The second piece is really, when you think about just African American culture, I mean, our culture has really helped redefine so many different industries. So from rock and roll to jazz to hip hop to what's now happening in fashion with, someone like Virgil, or, what Serena did in tennis, and like, Tiger Woods in golf. We really helped pioneer culture. Technology is the next frontier, and we need to make sure that we're also preparing our leaders within, across all different sectors and all different industries to also have access and opportunity, advisory opportunities, partnership areas to integrate with some of the work that they're doing. And then, really trying to find a unique path to really kind of change the future of technology, but do it in a way that is authentic to our culture, and also allows us to really kind of have a first in class and front row seat as we're trying to really help make a difference here.
I think you also mentioned like you wanted to change like what is a status symbol. That's like relatively new, where like not just African American celebrities, but all celebrities are getting like more involved with startups, and that's I guess we're like devaluing it a little bit by calling it a status thing, but like that's like it's almost like a branding change, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, look, I think that we're going into I would call it really just a consciousness shift where, before, endorsements were huge. I mean, the ability to get paid to promote a product was something that everybody knew and understood, and it was a huge business, and people, wanted to say, hey, look, this is my, Thai iced tea, right? And you get paid to endorse the product, and it's a win-win. But I think what we've seen is a dramatic shift where people understand their worth, and they also know that they can do it themselves. And I think that, the middleman is now being disseminated and allowing for direct conversations and direct partnership opportunities where you went from getting paid $100,000 to, having an example kind of what Dr. Dre did with Beats, creating an entire entity and having equity into the company, and how like LeBron, rather than getting a deal where you were going to be a promotional, partner, he said, well, I'd rather have equity into the business. And then once it gets acquired by Apple, like that's a completely different multiple from an opportunity perspective. And so and ownership is is really where the game is at, kind of, which is kind of goes to our similar point when we were talking about why equity is so important. And I think that it's such a great opportunity within our culture because the word is out and everybody knows. And it's not even just within technology, it's across so many different sectors, and people are starting their own businesses and running their own production companies and really starting to know the ins and outs and covering across all bases to become successful in their industry. So to me, it's something that I see as a progressive movement that's not going to go away. And, as this continues to evolve, more and more entrepreneurs are going to be built because of just this idea and this mind shift of going into an equity first business proposal, as opposed to, I want to get paid and then be happy. Even in the music industry, one of our LPs and a good friend, Steve Stout, like he's created United Masters so that, anybody can distribute and own 100% of their own, recordings, and own their own masters, as opposed to being in a record label where you might get an upfront check, but now, the real residuals come in the back end, and now you don't have access to that because you signed away your rights. But with that, there's a lot of education that needs to be contributed in order to understand the world of venture capital and the world of startup investing. And so for us, especially within the Cultural Leadership Fund, we want to make sure we provide access to information. We help work with the talent, and anybody that's interested in getting into venture capital, and providing them with the meaningful information and the meaningful resources so that they can ultimately become their own experts and go out and do it themselves.
How do you think celebrity investors kind of think differently from kind of more kind of normal VC investors?
To me, I don't necessarily consider them as celebrity investors. I just think that they have a strategic advantage that differentiates themselves from a institutional investor, right? So it could be the network that they're associated with. It could be their ability to, help behind the scenes and think about product. If you're, working on a banking platform and you're going to want to understand how could somebody purchase tickets to your concert. In the same way as a traditional venture capital firm has their resources, whether it's like a market development team or whether it's a corporate development team or a technical talent team, you name it. I think that the thing that people always will start off with is, hey, come tweet about my picture, about my product, or, can you do this Instagram post to me for my company? And, I think that, those are definitely opportunities that are accessible and can work. But at the end of the day, I think that talent, when you really can understand who they are and kind of remove the follower account and people who are following them or whatever, and really understand who they are as entrepreneurs, which is the most important thing, then you really get a chance to really dissect the ways in which that we can all work together in an industry. Because at the end of the day, everybody's focused on one thing, and that's innovation. And through innovation, you have the opportunity to become the top player in your field. My suggestion is always never think about talent first, or trying to get visibility, or have somebody on the cap table just because it might help with your press release. At the end of the day, think about how your product is really going to help change the world and help disrupt an industry that you're specifically focused on. And then through that, the appropriate people are going to get wind of it and want to continue to support and back your mission.
I think actually a lot of these cultural leaders ask really good questions around ethics that sometimes are lacking with Silicon Valley.
Ultimately, when you are going to be associated with the company or going to want to collaborate with somebody, you're going to want to check and see who is this person that I'm going to potentially put my name behind and put my capital to help support their initiatives. And so if you're doing something or building a company that's not ethical, or it doesn't kind of feel on the right side of where the world should be going, that makes it a lot harder for people to want to support you. And I think that's, and not necessarily, people can build whatever type of businesses they want, but, for us specifically with the Cultural Leadership Fund, we think that technology is going to really help impact the world. And we want to do our part in order to help communicate how we can bridge those gaps together.
We've talked about cap table quite a bit. What other things do you think entrepreneurs should be doing to increase diversity and have a more diverse outlook in general? What are concrete things that, they should be thinking about more?
I mean, look, I think that one of the easiest things you can do is go outside of your circles. The world is big. I mean, I came from, right outside of Atlanta. I went to school at Georgia State University, where to me, there was no diversity issues. I saw every single race, tons of different people. And so, the world is extremely colorful. And I think it actually just, knowing that, that having the opportunity as you start your company, maybe to, evaluate the criteria of where you're trying to hire, or what you're looking for, or, looking at different school systems outside of the traditional, whether it's the Ivy League schools or the places that people are, accustomed to knowing, okay, yeah, of course there's great talent at Stanford and Harvard and Yale and MIT and all these schools. Like, yeah, that's great. At the same time, the HBCU ecosystems have some of the world's best talent and some of the smartest people I've ever met that are running incredible companies right now and really helping change the world and have it in completely different perspective. One of my super close friends, his name's Deshaun Amari. Like, we're investors in his company called Maven, and he's revolutionizing hairstylists through technology and allowing anybody to kind of run their own business through his e-commerce platform and now most recently he's got a financial software that's really helping empower one of the largest industries in Black America and also all around the country and the world. Everybody has to get their hair done, but who would have thought that would be a potential multi-billion-dollar business? But you just have to have an understanding that there's you have to think outside of your culture and what because I think that once we can start doing that, I think that the problems that our companies are going to start solving are going to continue to expand. And then even more specifically, the opportunities to bring more people in to have unique perspectives and conversations, like ones we're having right now, can really help bring the world together.
What's the best fundraising advice you've ever received? All given.
Whenever you need to follow back up with an investor, don't just ping and say, hey, just checking in, do you have an update, right? I think it's always great to come back with additional information. Hey, just wanted to update you. Since we last caught up, metrics have gone up to the right. We've closed these two partners that were in LOI when we first started talking. We just signed our term sheet. We still have this a little bit room left. Happy to get you in, but the train is moving. Always showing progress and momentum throughout the stage of a fundraise, I think is always something that, regardless of whether or not that person you're trying to get committed is going to invest, what you're doing is that you're just continually reminding yourself that, look, I'm moving forward. And, at the end of the day, you have to remember that, you're the catch. Obviously, there's great investors in the world, but, investors are only successful because we have great entrepreneurs. And so as you continue to go about the process, always remember that that you are the reason why venture capital firms or any angel investor is successful. And so, never take anything personal and always make sure that you're coming in with your best foot forward.
That's a good way to think about it. Sometimes it feels like there's a power disparity towards the investor's side.
Also, identifying with firms that actually go against, that are in line with your target. I know so many people that will try and that are raising pre-seed rounds and going to try and talk with VC firms that don't even do pre-seed. And so make sure that you do your diligence on the type of investor. If you're a hardware company trying to raise money from a software firm, that's not going to work regardless of how big your idea is, just simply because VC firms also all have specific theses, investment types, check sizes that they like to write, ownership percentage that they need. And so, the more that entrepreneurs can stay up to speed and understand the investor and get the information, which is easily accessible now, across so many different platforms, and also just the community of just, double checking and seeing what people are interested in. Also on the blog posts, hear what people in the VC community are writing about, because that's a very high probability that those are the type of things that they're looking for to invest into. And so, that way it just keeps you on your toes and make sure that, you're targeting and working with the right people.
All right, last question. What's a good kind of embarrassing fundraising story you've got?
I remember flying across the country for a one-day pitch to go, and it was an LP that I really wanted to, have on the cap table. And, I was super prepared. We're going to meet at this fancy restaurant, and, I'm got my spiel, I got my pitch deck, and I go out there, and, I'm early, I'm all prepared, I'm hungry. All right, we're going to eat this meal. It's going to be good. We sit down. We talk for literally 10 minutes. He has one bite of his soup and says, all right, I'm good. And thank you very much. I heard everything in like 15 minutes. And he's like, I gotta go. And I was like, okay, cool. Yeah, it was so great. And afterwards, I was like, oh my God, like what the heck just happened? Like, like I just like, are you in or are you not in? Like, what's going on? Like, it was so for, I'm a Virgo, so I'm like very much in my head trying to understand like what was going on. And then, sure enough, he was just smarter than me. It's like, I got it like that quick. I didn't have to, finish my soup. And so for me, it was just a funny situation where, I always was over interpreting and overthinking things. And especially, because I didn't hear back for a few days. And so I'm like, I just flew all the way across the country for a half bowl of soup. And I don't know if they're going to accept this or not. But sure enough, that kind of always gave me a lesson to, one, never take anything personal, because you never know what's going on in the other person's mind. And also, to always make sure that you're doing your best. And if you do your best, like, you can always just put your foot forward and say, look, I gave it my all. And, if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. And I'm going to keep rolling one way or another. I definitely did finish my soup. And so,
Did you finish his soup as well?
Hey, hey, look. We've had multiple dinners since then, and we've finished the whole course. And he's actually, one of my favorite LPs now. And so, but it was a great lesson, and also a funny experience, just because when I was early on in the process and wasn't necessarily sure how the whole LP game it was going to work, but ended up doing it and ended up working out well. And now I can laugh about it. But back then, when I felt like the whole world was on my shoulders, I had no idea what was going to happen.
That's a great story. All right, Chris, thanks for taking the time to join us for Series T. Really appreciate you kind of going through all these stories and giving us your insight. If someone wants to connect with you, what's the best way?
Yeah, well, if someone wants to connect with me, you can always, feel free. I'm on Instagram, I'm on Twitter. If you're really good at, cold intros, then you can send me an email, and then obviously, how to guess the email addresses. So if you get it right, we'll respond. So, whatever way you want.
All right, cool. Thanks, Chris.
Hey, appreciate you, man. Enjoy your tea.